Liana. I am an editor over at Game Informer magazine, and today I wanted to talk about, on my new channel, thank you for joining me, my impressions of Cyberpunk 2077. So before we get started, I do want to address the elephant in the room. This was not given to me by the company. There's a lot of discourse and a lot of controlling narratives around who has a chair and what that means. I don't agree with that. I think especially with press gets things all the time, and it's our job to not let that influence anything. But there are aspects where I will decline something if I think that I'm already like really on the fence about it. I don't want to take anything free because I already kind of know what I'm going to say about it if it's negative. Just like I did with New World, I was like, I don't need anything, thank you though. But this was not given to me by CD Projekt Red. This was gifted to me by a friend who is not in the industry for Christmas because they know how excited I was for this game. I was a huge fan of the original tabletop game. It was originally just called Cyberpunk, and then the newer editions were Cyberpunk 2020 and then Cyberpunk Red. So when the Witcher studio, CD Projekt Red, announced that they were doing an adaptation of that tabletop game, I was immensely excited. I have also seen quite a bit of the game prior to launch. I had it about a week and a half before launch for a review, and then I've done a lot of the press demos for it too. So there was a lot. And it was Game Informer's cover story, and then I was a part of the two E3 private press events from years ago before it was open up to the public. So there was no like blind excitement about this, or there's a conversation that a lot of people are excited just out of brand loyalty from The Witcher, which I can see. And that wasn't the case here. There was the excitement because of my admiration for Pondsmith's world building, and then my excitement of just what I had seen previously. But that being said, I think that I do want to mention that I am not here to tell you what to buy, what to play. That's up to you. I never want to tell anybody what they should and shouldn't do with their time. If you're excited for this game, especially in 2020 where things are rough, then enjoy it. I would say if you're on the fence with it, read reviews that from reviewers that you trust. Get your own perspective. There's nothing wrong with getting different perspectives, even if it's a perspective outside of your own. Listening to somebody else's input isn't negating your already there perception or opinion, but that's what we're here for. That's information building. You learn new aspects, and then that can build upon your own perception. Or you can discard how you want. Taking it in doesn't automatically negate anything that was already there. It can help improve upon it. There's always room to learn more. A good case in point is Polygon recently wrote an article about Cyberpunk 2077's marketing, and while I didn't agree with everything, I thought it was very well researched and very interesting in learning some of the more directive, off-the-wall, and she mentioned edgelord tactics, and I thought it was very interesting. It was a very well-researched piece. I enjoyed reading it. Didn't agree with everything, but there were a lot of points I did agree with, and I thought that was a very interesting piece, and I liked it. So, so leading up to this, I've had beat the game. I had it for a while before launch, as I already mentioned. Overall, I really, really enjoyed the game. I have made no mistake or no attempt to hide the fact that I love RPGs. I love being able to have a lot of immersion into those type of stories, and Cyberpunk 2077 did a really good job of making you immersed into that world of Night City. And that is both a positive and a negative. This game is very good, and it is also incredibly problematic. And I know even the word problematic is problematic at this point because it's kind of tossed around without a lot of regard to context sometimes. And so I wanted to kind of talk about what I enjoyed and what I thought was problematic. And I feel like for anybody that's on the fence of this game, hopefully this gives you a little perspective, but don't take my word. I am not you. I don't receive games the way you do. I don't perceive games the way you do. We're all individuals with our own unique takes on life. So you should never take somebody's word at mouth. You should just let it influence how you want it to influence and be just a little small puzzle piece to the bigger picture on how you go forward. So for me, I really loved this storyline for the most part, but to me, Cyberpunk 2077's strength isn't its main story, it's the side quests. Like the main story, there were a lot of hit or misses. There were some times where there were these major plot holes that were just never resolved, or some parts that felt really rushed. And then but then if you go through the side quests, and they're so bountiful and they're so intricate, and they introduce characters that are so interesting and intriguing, that it was really just beautiful. And I wanted to, explore everything. And I was trying to, rush the story as much as I could, because I wanted to be able to have enough to contribute to the review. The base review is being handled by Reiner over at Game Informer, but Kim Wallace and I are helping with side content and feature ideas surrounding it, because it's arguably one of the biggest games of this year, despite its numerous delays. And it was, going back to the side quest, I noticed that I was enjoying the side quest much more than I was enjoying the base storyline. The characters are incredibly fleshed out. It's very guttural. And here's the thing, a lot of people are going to mention, because again, there are a lot of problematic aspects in this, and some of those really made me sick and really made me go back and forth on how I felt about the game. And I wish they didn't do certain things, because I feel like it didn't impact the story the way they needed it to. The thing there is needs to separate. There are some uncomfortable aspects that are uncomfortable just to be uncomfortable. That's the point. This is supposed to be a hopeless, rundown, vicious world. It's lawless, it's militant, it's hedonism in its highest pure form. I mean, it is meant to make you feel uncomfortable. You're meant to feel dirty. You're meant to feel gross. You're meant to question, are you the villain? Are you a good person? Who are you in this world of Night City? And you can't have that kind of a world and play it safe. It's just the nature of it. In my opinion, you can't build that kind of a world that's meant to feel like it's crawling under your skin like a snake and play it safe. That being said, I have an issue with how they portrayed the trans community. And I say this because I have been in relationships with people that were transgender. I'm a very strong ally of the trans community. And I feel like some instances around that community were handled in a way to make a point. And then there were others that were just wrong. I don't remember what the location was, but it was one of those bars, and there was an instance where there were two sex workers in the back room, and it was a cis woman and then it was a trans woman. And the trans woman, they deliberately made her look very male. There were no feminine identifiers at all, which is okay. You don't need to look feminine to be a woman. You don't. But I felt like that wasn't the reasoning behind that design choice. It felt very mocking, and the conversation between the two women were, the cis woman was basically making fun of this character, saying, "Oh, honey, you don't know what it's like to be a real woman." And, the trans woman was like, I'm a woman. I deserve to be here just as much as you do. And she's like, "Okay, honey, well then you're going to find out how hard it is to be a woman, but not looking like it was just," she was making fun of the way she looked. She was making fun of her build. She was making fun of her past. She dead named. It was very uncomfortable because it didn't feel like it was a plot device to educate or a plot device that had any real meaning behind it. And so if you're going to throw something in there just to throw something in there, don't do it at the expense of a community that is dealing with very real issues of being killed and murdered and brutalized because they're transgender. That is a very real world problem. And I felt like in those instances where the trans community was represented in that way, it was very unnecessary. It didn't improve the plot. It didn't give character development. It didn't provide world building. So why was it there? It was there, I feel like, as shock jock humor, or that shock factor. And the game is already incredibly shocking. There are so many moments I'm not going to talk about for spoilers, but there were so many moments where my jaw was on the floor. So you don't need that additional tiny little shock. You don't need it. It's already there. It's already prevalent throughout the entire story. And so that was kind of an issue with me. Another issue that I really had with it that made me sick to my stomach is, and this is going to be where I a little bit too much information, you'll learn in my channel, I don't hide anything. I'm a very open book, and that gets me in trouble a lot more than it doesn't. But years ago, my best friend sexually assaulted me, and I was a victim of rape, and that was when I found out that I was actually allergic to the date rape drug. I started sneezing, I was coughing up blood, I was in the hospital. And then after that, they actually chased me out of town, mocking me that I would put myself in that position, even though he was my best friend. I had no reason not to trust him. So that's kind of a sore spot for me. And there was a lot of rape in this game. There's one with a plot device with a very major character that didn't really feel like it had a point. Like, they built this character to be up such a cornerstone type character, and then they just did her really dirty, and they didn't explain anything about it. It was just there, and then the character was never talked about ever again. Like, it was so brutally violent for no reason. There was no world building there. Like, if you were going to use that plot, make it count. Like, make it be something that drives V for vengeance. Make it be something that serves a purpose. And it just felt like unneeded brutality. But that wasn't what really got me, because you could kind of tell it was going in that direction after a certain point. What got to me was I felt like I couldn't go anywhere without stumbling upon a man and a woman where the woman is obviously drugged, and it's very clear what's happening. This was happening in bar settings. This was happening in alleyways. This was happening in broad daylight in the street. And it bothered me because you couldn't do anything. I would have loved if they felt the need to do that every 20 seconds to maybe go up and have the interact prompt come up where you could stop it, where you could save her, or you could say something, and you couldn't. And you just kind of had to stand there and watch this happen. And it sucked. It really sucked because, again, rape is something that's very real, and it's a very real part of the reality, and it's a very real part of this kind of, dystopian future where people take what they want when they want it. So obviously that fits into that. But every 20 minutes, and with you don't even know the characters' names. So if you're going to make it nameless, make it a point where V can stop it, and that can up their street cred, or stop it and that gives them, like how Mass Effect has the Renegade Paragade options, like it can rank up a certain skill if they stop it, or if they don't stop it, it also detracts, point. Make it something that impacts the game in any way other than just being there just to make you uncomfortable. But it wasn't, and it was hard. And I talked to a few writers that were reviewing this game that I knew had similar experiences to me in the past in terms of sexual assault, and they all said that it made them want to throw up. One woman actually did say she threw up. It was incredibly traumatizing, brought all that back up. The only bright side is it did convince her to go to therapy to deal with it. She didn't realize she hadn't really dealt with it until she played this game. There's a lot. I want to say there's a lot of misrepresentation of cliches. We've seen a lot of Latinx writers talk about, how their communities are represented. The Haitian community, which is Pacifica, it was portrayed a little differently. I am not of those communities, so I'm not going to talk like I'm an authority on those communities. I think that's a little detractive and takes away from their voices, because I can't possibly know what that feels like. But I will say, if you're interested in learning more about that, Natalie over on Twitter, she is great. She works for fanbyte.com. She has some really nice introspective pieces about things like that. There's a lot of people that are in those communities that are just speaking out. It's very easy to search for those. I highly recommend, if you're interested in learning more about that and how this game handles certain communities, please look into those, because those are very well written. And again, you just reading it doesn't mean you have to agree, have to disagree, but it's another perspective to add to your pile. So there's that, but there were times where I wanted to put the game down because it just was very guttural. And then there were other times where I didn't want to put it down because the story was so gripping. The sex makes porn look mild. And there was a lot of instances where if you're romancing somebody and you're getting down, Johnny Silverhand is just kind of there commentating, which on one hand was kind of funny, on the other hand made me feel very skeezy. And then there were times where his character, again, the shock factor, the amount of times he would call me a cunt was a little much. I kind of surprised Keanu, like, you know, decided to do this role, because he's usually very particular about the roles and what he wants to put out there. And there are times where his character really crosses the line, and then there's kind of the redemptive moments too. Like, he's a very complex character, and you don't really get to see that complexity until much later in the game, which brings up another good point. This game is very weird in pacing. It kind of throws you in with no context. Like, there's no real tutorial. You're suddenly thrown into all these side quests. You're suddenly thrown into upgrades. You don't even get to the the intro screen until like 4 hours into the game. But as you start getting the feel for it, it starts to click into place. But the story for me didn't really start becoming anything intriguing or anything I wanted to pursue until about 10 hours into the game, and then I was hooked. But there were still those moments where I wanted to put it down because I was kind of disgusted. At the same time, knowing that it was meant to be disgusting. It was meant to be, again, visceral and making you feel gross, because everybody's gross. It's a seedy underbelly. The whole premise is you're a seedy person trying to make a name for themselves in the underground. You're not gonna have a plot like that and have it be puppy dogs and rainbows. And I see what CD Projekt Red was going for. I feel like in a lot of ways they really hit the nail on the head. Pondsmith was very involved with this project too, so I think we're going to hear a lot of journalists say, like, this doesn't respect Pondsmith's vision, but it does. And that's something that's very important to remember, that Pondsmith was very involved with the creative direction of this game. He wasn't left in the dark like a lot of creators. He was very involved, and if that's the case, then we can't really say it didn't match up to his vision, because he's literally the one that created it. Whether you agree with that or not, I don't know. I don't know what to say, because it is what it is. And you know, if that's the case, then we need to do a deep dive into the Cyberpunk tabletop game, because there's a lot of themes that Cyberpunk 2077 took further, but they were all pre-existing themes into the tabletop version. But we're seeing it in a very realistic way, especially this generation's graphics. And it's something to consider. I really enjoyed it though. There was a lot of characters. There were so many characters that I cared about. I really loved Judy. There's one romance option that you'll meet later in the game that is tied to Rogue, and I really love her as well. I loved how sassy she was and how she knows who she is, and she's not unwilling to fight for herself, and I really liked her. I really loved Jackie. There's a lot to love. There's a lot to be worried about. There's a lot that's gonna make you uncomfortable. I hate the driving. Oh my god, I will walk the 1,000 miles it takes before I ever get in a car in that game. And that's just personal preference. I hate driving in games. It's the worst. I never want to do it. Screw it. Nope. I will walk. I don't care if it takes me 2 hours to get to the destination. I will walk. But I actually liked it too, because I would recommend actually walking a lot if you don't mind the little bit additional weight, because you're going to pass by a lot of side quest opportunities that aren't showing up on the map with markers. You're also going to overhear a lot of conversations that are just very interesting for the world building aspect to it. And it's cool to see the different shops and the grotesque advertisement. There's so many advertisements that are meant to be offensive. They are literally created with the sole purpose of being offensive. Again, for that hedonistic feeling of immersion of, we're not in the real world anymore. We are in someplace completely different. It was intentional. And I think that is something that is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. I think that it's important going in knowing that's going to be there, and knowing it was intentional, and deciding if that's a make or break moment for you. That is very, you have to decide what you're willing to watch, what you want to support, what you want to enjoy, what you want to play. And I feel like every side of the equation needs to have their space to speak on what they feel. There are going to be people that are violently against this game, and the reasons they have, whether you agree with opposing the game or not, is really irrelevant. The reasons they have are valid, and the reasons that people have for supporting the game are valid. It is not hard to see how much work and creative input and creative strategy and just creativity in general was put into Cyberpunk 2077. These are developers that had a vision, that worked collaboratively together. A lot of devs that I've talked to just very passionate about their parts. You know, everybody has a smaller part to play, and it builds into this bigger game experience. And listening to their philosophies behind it and what kind of research they went into develop these world narratives, it's very intriguing. It's a very detailed game. Like I said, there's a lot of interactions. It feels real. It feels like there were moments where I feel like I could almost, I'm from New Orleans and from the city of New Orleans, so like we're used to like the smell of booze and horse shit, and there were moments when I was walking through the game where I could almost smell that. That's how immersive it gets at times. And there's some crazy twists and turns in this game, like insane. I would say, you know, this is kind of getting a little bit longer of a video, but I would say, like, going in, know that it's going to be very problematic. Read reviews from reviewers you trust, and make the decision yourself if it's something that you are interested in enough, or if it's crossed the line that you don't want to support. And whatever you decide, that's your decision. That's your decision. So that was me. Would I recommend this game? Yes. A tentative yes. There's a lot of things I wish the studio would have handled differently. I've already mentioned that. I'm not going to go over it again, but like, I feel like there's a lot of things that could have been cut because it served no real purpose. Also, one final warning. This game is not epileptic friendly, which I'm actually very kind of peeved about, because I interviewed, I can't remember what his name was, but he was one of the newer members, because Cyberpunk, or CD Projekt Red, had a very tumultuous history of being very not a good place to work, and they've changed a lot. They brought in a lot of new people to kind of change up the culture. You have to recognize when a company makes the effort for evolution. Does that mean that the evolution's complete and it's done? No. Obviously there have been some missteps, and there continue to be missteps. But it was one of the newer people, and he came over from the US side. And I asked him, I was like, you know, the first demo I watched, it was not epileptic friendly. And he goes, yeah, we're looking into that. We're making a lot of core changes. That was a lie. There was like every 2 seconds, there were epileptic triggers like crazy. And it wasn't small epileptic triggers. It was like, there's the brain dance. In order to go into a brain dance, you get this goggle put on, and it flashes the red and lights. It's a bunch of LEDs, and they just flash like this. Which is funny when they say that they tried to make it epileptic friendly, because it literally mimics the device in real life. When I was trying to get my diagnosis, because the epilepsy is a part of a chemical attack I had when I was active duty, and part of it was when they try to trigger to capture a seizure on camera, they put a device over your eyes, and it literally is a bunch of lights, and they flash red and white in quick succession, and that's literally what they do to scientifically trigger a seizure. One moment, my dog is doing crazy stuff. Rainy, stop. I love you. Stop. And that's literally what the whole purpose of that device's existence is, to trigger a seizure. And so every time, and there's a lot of times instances in the game where a brain dance is intricate to the story and is required to progress in the story, and that's the device you have to do every time you enter a brain dance sequence, it was exhausting. And it made it really hard to progress the game to the timetable that I was given, because I was constantly having to push myself, despite knowing, like, okay, I'm losing sight on my right side. I'm getting a lot of these warning signs that I typically get before I have an epileptic episode, and I had to just keep pushing that. And I would like to say that was my decision. I know that if I would have brought that to Rainer, he would have told me to pull back, but I wanted to help, so that's not on my team at all. But and then I did on Saturday. I pushed myself too hard this Saturday before launch, and I actually had a really bad seizure. I was like drooling everywhere. It put me out the rest of the night. And I wish that more companies would take care with that, especially because so many of the instances, like going into the black wall, like as simple as muting the red a little bit to make it more grayscale would have fixed that. Just tiny tweaks to not make the effect any less, but just a little bit safer. I wish they would have done that. That was a little disappointing. So I will say too, if you're watching this and you're an epileptic, be very, very, very careful and be very aware going in, because this is a very dangerous game for epileptics. So that was my thoughts on Cyberpunk 2077. I'm not telling you what to do regarding the game. It is a very interesting story. It is a story you have never seen before. It is a very unique story. It is a very unique game experience that I think that has a lot to offer. It could have been taken to the next level if they took a little bit more care. But congratulations to CD Projekt Red on launching their game. I hope those that get it, that have been excited, I hope the game lives up to your expectations. If you decide to pass on it because of any of the reasons listed above, that's fine. I can also, anybody that is interested and then was like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to deal with the representation or the epileptic triggers or anything like that. If you're looking for a Cyberpunk game, comment in the comments. I will give you some cool recommendations. There's a lot of games in this genre that are deserving of love too. Sorry, my throat. But yeah, so thank you guys for tuning in to my second video, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye!